Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Lettermen Row. Mick Walker on the other side of your screen. I'm Spencer Holbrook. We thought we were going to start doing more video. Life gets in the way. But it is what it is. Ryan Day spoke on Tuesday in a post-spring, pre-summer wrap-up, preview, whatever you want to call it, however you want to split it. Ryan Day spoke for about 40 minutes on Tuesday, April 29th. We're here on April 30th breaking it all down because we had a lot to write off of that on Tuesday. So now we're here on a Wednesday breaking it down. Mick, how are you?
I'm doing great, man. Like you said, we had a nice little availability yesterday. Good day, just a couple meetings, couple phone calls, doing the normal recruiting job stuff to try and get some stories coming out. We'll have a ton coming over the next couple days. Headed down to Cincinnati tomorrow to see a couple of guys. So we're busy right now with the showcase season in Ohio.
There you go. Recruiting grind never stops. May gets a little, I'm not going to lie, guys, it's a little slow for a man like myself on the team side. But we'll have you covered. We're going to go position by position here soon. We're going to start doing some summer breakdowns, some post-spring wrap-up breakdowns. But that's what Ryan Day was doing on Tuesday, which we knew what the conversation was going to be. We have to start here. Ohio State targeting basically one position in the transfer portal, just one, and that's defensive tackle. I mean, the Buckeyes went after a couple offensive linemen. They ended up getting one, and Justin Terry from West Virginia, who was at West Virginia for 1 year, comes in, now has all 4 years at Ohio State. He'll develop on the offensive line. I don't think he's an instant impact guy, so we can talk about him later and what all of that means. But they're targeting defensive tackles. They got the defensive end, Bo Atkinson. That's great, an edge, but I think that's kind of a cherry on top for this defensive end group. Now you're looking at defensive tackles, and I wanted to just read, Mick, what Ryan Day said about the pursuit of defensive tackles when he was asked about it yesterday, because it was pretty telling to me in contrast to what we heard all spring. And all spring, what we heard was, I think we've got to take a hard look at it. I don't think I have the answer right now, but I've got to look at it. It seemed to me like there was a lot of knockback on the offensive side of the ball here. But then again, I don't want to make any judgments until I watch the film. Now, that knockback was in reference to the spring game where the Ohio State offensive line kind of dominated those defensive tackles. Well, let's flash forward 2 weeks to what we heard from Ryan Day on Tuesday. Asked if they were looking at defensive tackles, he said, we have, but, we wanted to make sure that we bring in somebody. It has to be an upgrade to what we have. And so we're not just going to do it to do it. I think we have looked, and we're going to continue to look, but we're not just going to bring in someone just to do that. Mick, that is so telling to me. Ohio State has 9 defensive ends on its roster. It has 8 defensive tackles on its roster. The Buckeyes do not see upgrades in the transfer portal from what they have. Now, are they concerned about the state of the defensive tackle room? Based on what I've been told, I think there is a level of concern with what is in the defensive tackle room beyond the starters, the projected starters of Edric Houston and Caden McDonald. But the transfer portal, the spring transfer portal window was downright gross. Like, with all respect to the guys who were in the portal, there were some high-end talents in the portal. Overall, the spring transfer portal window was gross. There were not upgrades from what Ohio State has. So why would you bring in a guy who's just going to compete for third-string reps? Because you're just going to keep developing the same guys regardless. I like this. You know what? This is the bed that we've made. We're gonna go lay in it. There's no reason to bring in other guys if you don't think that they're immediate, instant upgrades. And so, do I think there needs to be a long, hard look at defensive tackle? Absolutely. But if there's no clear upgrades, I don't see a need to bring in a guy just to say that you did it. What do you think?
No, I think I totally agree. And if you read through the lines, he is essentially really just telling us, like, yeah, we looked and the options weren't that great. I think the Armand Watson, I believe is his name, the Syracuse defensive tackle who they had interest in, who eventually signed with Texas. They weren't able to get him to campus. That's probably one guy that they would have liked to have, probably an upgrade as your third defensive tackle, like over kind of what they have there with some unproven guys. Other than that, I mean, they brought on Troy Pikes to campus. I think there were some things that kind of led them in another direction. But overall, even then, he probably would have been at best your third, probably your fourth, maybe your third defensive tackle. Otherwise, there really wasn't a ton of great options. And that includes a guy like Justin Kirkland, who was the most recent entry from Oklahoma State. Like, he was a rotational player for the Cowboys. I don't necessarily know if that changes for Columbus. Maybe they show interest in him just because to add depth for depth's sake. But listening to Ryan Day speak on Tuesday, it did not sound like they're just looking to add depth for depth's sake. It was we're looking to get impact players, and there weren't any in the portal this spring, so we're gonna have to just play with what we have.
Yeah, he said that they have 18 defensive linemen. I think I have the number at 17 right now. That's a lot of defensive linemen. And yes, most of them are first or second year players who are developing. This was a large defensive line class that Larry Johnson took: 3 defensive tackles, 2 defensive ends, and Zion Grady, Epi Santanile, Maxwell Roy, Trajan Odom, and Jarquez Carter. I think Carter is probably the one who's going to push for playing time the most of that first year group. You've got Eric Mensah, defensive tackle, who's starting to come along a little bit as a second-year player, but was a lowly ranked recruit. So you probably think that he needs a year or two to develop. You look at Jason Moore, Will Smith Jr., like those guys are the ones now where it's like, okay.
Tywan Malone as well.
Tywan Malone, the fifth-year senior, like if you're not doing it now, you are never doing it here. And so it is now or never, quite literally, because they not only want you to come along and develop, they need you. And so the onus is on those guys. Because I don't see, unless a grad transfer goes in, or there's some name that hasn't appeared in the portal yet for some reason with paperwork getting lost on some compliance desk. Listen, like I'll just put it bluntly, like Peter Woods ain't walking into the portal, guys. Like it's just not happening. And so, Justin Scott's not going in the transfer portal from Miami, the guy that everybody thinks should be here, anyway. So this is what it is. And so I think that the Buckeyes are not like resigned to that, but they also understand the situation. Like, okay, this is what we have. And is there concern? I am led to believe yes. But is there so much concern that you have to go reach on a guy that you don't really think can make you in a better positioned to defend your national championship? I don't see one. And so I don't see the reason for them to go into the portal and to just add a guy onto a scholarship just for the sake of doing it. And so I like the approach. They went in, they looked, they don't have it. And yeah, you can point to all of the recruiting misses at defensive tackle the last few years and the Larry Johnson recruiting strategy that some people like to pick apart, or the losses, and you should have seen this coming in 2025. I agree with some of that. I think there's a little bit of truth in all of that. But I also think that Hero Canoe leaving kind of put them in a bind, and it was hard to recover from that. So, this is also, Mick, and I don't mean to ramble here. This is also a casualty of winning the national championship. The portal was opened and closed in the winter before you even knew who was staying and who was going on your roster because you were playing so deep into the season that you won a national championship. That's what Ryan Day is talking about when he talks about, and he says, like, nobody's going to feel sorry for us, but this is the reality. Like Marcus Freeman, same exact thing. Like the portal was only open for Ohio State and Notre Dame for 5 days, but it was after everyone else had already started reloading their arms for the 2025 season, and then the portal closed for everyone else. And so it's just like there's nothing you can really do about it. And so that's where we are with defensive tackle. But I thought those quotes from Ryan Day were really interesting.
Yeah, like you said, nobody's going to feel bad for them. They're Ohio State. They just won the national championship. And ultimately, like I put it on the Lettermen Lounge yesterday, $1 for your first 7 days. You can come on there and kind of hang out and talk to us about whatever you have curious about Ohio State athletics. But I put it on the Lettermen Lounge. Like, I don't think this directly falls on high school recruiting, but it starts there. Like, I understand that Larry Johnson signed a very good class last year, but the reality is with all positions, not just defensive line, signing an Ohio State caliber player out of the portal is very difficult to do. Finding those type of players that just enter the portal is not easy to do. So when you have to rely on them, like Ohio State had to rely on to get offensive tackles, and they did. They prioritized that spot. They landed a couple offensive tackles, and those two guys are still fighting to make sure that they earn their starting spots, and I think they ultimately will. But finding Ohio State caliber players out of the portal is just not a sustainable plan. So it ultimately goes down to high school recruiting. But then once you kind of get in there, and like you said, when you have those misses, and then you add in the equation of playing for a national championship, the portal kind of being closed, then you're just dealing with this whole situation where there aren't good players to add in that situation. So it's unfortunate for Ohio State and their defensive line. Like it could hurt them next season, but like you said, that overall, if you look at last season's defensive line, like a big reason why we're in this spot is because they had two very talented defensive tackles, and they didn't do a large rotation with them. Like we weren't talking about Edric Houston and Caden McDonald playing a ton of snaps last year. It was the two ties, Ty Hamilton, Tyreek Williams, that were both top 3 round picks in the NFL draft this past weekend, played a lot of snaps. And like Edric Houston and Caden McDonald could very well do that this season, but they have no proof of like concept of doing that. So that's going to be the big question. If they can do that and do it at a high level, then sure, we shouldn't see like a large amount of drop off. But if they are not able to sustain that play, like time over time, game over game, could be a big question.
And listen, like the light comes on for different players at different times. Does the light come on for Jason Moore, a former top 60 prospect who is entering his 3rd season in kind of a now or never mode? Does it come on in the middle of June and all of a sudden he enters July and August and he looks like what everyone hoped eventually he would look like, which is Georgia, former, old Florida, Alabama looking defensive tackle? Like maybe the light comes on. And you can't rely on maybes when you're trying to win a national championship, but to some extent in today's college football, you have to, because, you're kind of saying the same thing about quarterback. Maybe Julian Sands going to be a 1st-round pick. Maybe he's not. Maybe Lincoln Keenholz is going to develop really nicely and be the starting quarterback. Maybe he's not. So, there are reasons to be optimistic about defensive tackle and the development plan that Larry Johnson has for these guys. You just haven't seen it yet. Like you said, the proof of concept is just not there for Jason Moore, for Will Smith Jr. I question whether it will ever be there for Tywan Malone because he's a 5th-year player and they're talking about needing to see more. I don't know how much more you're ever going to see from a 5th-year guy, because this spring was like the opportunity to show like, yeah, there's no need to go in the portal. Like Larry Johnson, Ryan Day said at the beginning of spring that they needed help in the we're going to have to look and see, and defensive tackle is a concern. Larry Johnson kind of rebuffed and said like, hey, let's wait until the end of spring and see where we're at. And at the end of spring, Ryan Day was like, well, we have to take a look at it. So, there was obviously not enough shown in spring ball, but that doesn't mean that the light can't come on in June, July, and August, and you're ready and you see those guys out there against Texas. So we'll see. That's just the story right now, is defensive tackle. What else did we learn from Ryan Day? Oh, yeah, the quarterbacks. Crazy that Ryan Day just kind of admitted it. He said, heading into the spring game, Lincoln was a little ahead of Julian. And then in the spring game, he admitted that Julian played better than Lincoln. Listen, you want transparency from a head coach? There you go. Like, you're not going to find a more honest head coach about his quarterback situation than that. So this is about as 50-50 as it gets right now, and the quarterback competition will go directly into the summer, Mick.
Yeah, he's very candid about the whole thing yesterday, which kind of surprised me. Like, not only that comment, but also like asking about previous quarterback battles. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I can't remember if he said this current quarterback battle or the one between Devin Brown and Kyle McCord was closer coming out of spring. I thought he said it was the Brown and McCord battle that was closer coming out of spring. But this one, I still thought he put in the same round of like, hey, this is a close battle. Like it could come down, spring, like the fall camp's ultimately going to decide that. That's been Ryan Day's track record, regardless. Like you wrote in you got the answer here, or like you wrote yesterday on your story. You said, hey, he was never going to name a quarterback on April 29th. Well, nobody expected that, but the way he kind of talked about it yesterday was eye-opening, because he really gave us an actual, without naming a starting quarterback, he gave the feeling within the building. He kind of shared that with the media, which is surprising.
Yeah, I mean, he's not going to just tip his hand and tell you who he thinks the starter would be. However, we have heard in the past, there are times where somebody will say, like, do you have a feeling on who you think it could be? And he'll say yes, but he won't give out who it is. Like, yesterday was like, no, I don't. So for anybody who thinks that this is just Julian Sands' job, and I said this in the story yesterday, it just seems like it depends on the day. So, Lincoln was ahead before the spring game, which was not hard to see if you were at the practice with the high school coaches for the clinic the day before the spring game. Lincoln was ahead of Julian, guys. But during the spring game, I was very pleasantly surprised to see how well Julian played. And Lincoln started slow, but ended up playing well. And so now you've got a good competition here. And it's not one of those when you have two quarterbacks, you have none. I think these guys are both pretty good options. So, we'll see what happens. But there's reasons to be optimistic about this quarterback battle right now.
Yeah, and obviously, like we talked about through all spring, every spring practice is just 1 of 15. Like, you weight it somewhat the same, like within the coaches' like viewpoint, the grades and everything. But there's also Ryan Day, for anybody that didn't listen to it, he gave kind of a great speech to the idea of not a speech, a great thought process to the research he's done to this idea of like rising to the occasion, or people that are just like gamers. And like he kind of just went on about how it's not really the case. When you get in that situation, you rely on the technique and what you've kind of learned in the past. So knowing that and having him say that, it seems like Julian saying in that game kind of fell back on what they've taught and did a little bit more within that system and how they've taught him. And I have to think, knowing that in a game like situation, like where they wait that, like things are live, like fans are there, I have to think that while it is 1 of 15, seeing Julian perform that way, falling back on his technique, falling back on what he's taught in a game like situation has to weigh more than probably 1 of 15. Maybe, I don't know if it's like twice as impactful as one practice or what, but I think it has to weigh more just knowing what he was able to do when we put them in these pressure situations, when it's not controlled settings. Does he fall back on his training? And I think Julian did a better job of doing that than Lincoln in the spring game.
Yeah, so we'll see. We'll see what happens to quarterback. Other news and notes from the Ryan Day press conference. The scholarship limits, the roster limits, Ryan Day talked about that a little bit. It was very interesting to hear his perspective on it. I'm not going to go stand on a soapbox about the NCAA, and I don't swear on this show. Maybe I don't swear enough on this show. I think it is absolute bull, plug in the word, that these coaches are in April 30th and don't know the size of their roster for next year, this upcoming year. I think it's garbage for the coaches. I think it's garbage for the players especially, and I am going to rant here a little bit. They depend on these these judges, because the judges are just doing what they're being asked to do. It's not the judge's fault. They're depending on these judges to make a ruling that the NCAA could just sack up and make a decision on at any time. But they refuse to do that, and they refuse to modernize, and they were so stuck in their ways for so long that now they're relying on these judges, and these judges have to take everything, rules and regulations, statutes, and precedents in the court of law with businesses and not just athletics into effect. And so they have to take everything into account and then make a ruling. Well, that's going to require time. And if you thought this house settlement was just going to go through easily and it was going to get to 105, you should have prepared for that more, NCAA. It's freaking garbage, Mick, that Ryan Day has to stand up there and say, well, we talked to our walk-ons and we thought that we were going to be down to 105. So we told a few of them that we might not have a roster spot for them, and now they're going to transfer. And now the house settlement's not going to pass. So now we're back to the 120 mark. And so some of these guys we probably would have had on our roster have transferred out. And so we don't know what our size of our roster is going to be. And on August 1st, we might have to tell this walk-on wide receiver, hey, we don't have a roster spot for you. And you also can't go in the transfer portal until December. What are we doing? I'm sorry. But anyway, Ryan Day talked about it a little bit. Said that, he had some tough conversations talking about the 105. Then you hear you might not be able to get to the 105, and we're having those conversations in real time. And you don't want to look at a guy in the eye and say, sorry, I won't have a roster spot for you right before the season, when I haven't at least had the opportunity for them to get in the portal and check out what their options are. He said, and so we're just being transparent in those situations because these guys, whether they're a scholarship player or a walk-on, they still put as much work in. And so I just feel like it was the right thing to do in a time where we don't really know for sure what's going to shake out. Look, this is like very, very good from Ryan Day. He's trying his best in a time where nobody can figure out what the hell is going on. And so I applaud him for being transparent with some of these walk-ons, telling them to go get in the portal and to find their spot, because the NCAA is incompetent and can't do its job. Sorry, that's a rant, but I just thought it was cool that Ryan Day is being transparent with these guys, letting a guy like Reese Stocksdale, TC Cathey go find somewhere to play.
Yeah, I mean, he's not the only coach. Like, there was a big deal about Nebraska losing a handful of walk-ons to the transfer portal. Like, there's plenty of college coaches that are doing it a very commendable way of saying, hey, we might not have a roster spot for you. If you would like to play somewhere else next season, get in the portal. Heck, we could bring you back. I don't know. Like, obviously different situation, but I think there were Sam Williams-Dixon entered his name into the portal, like, independently of any kind of situation where he was told to. And he was just sitting there, and Ohio State, Ryan Day ultimately decided, hey, we would rather have him on our roster than have him sitting at home next season. So we're going to bring Sam Williams-Dixon back. And that could happen with some of these walk-ons. Like you mentioned,
Bryson Rogers, same way.
Reese Stocksdale, like Nate Regal, who was a Luke Montgomery's teammate at Finley, who is a decent player as a defensive lineman, as a walk-on. Like, he's in the portal. TC Cathey. Like, there's the guys that I think ultimately Ohio State would like to still have on the roster. But if you don't know the situation, you can't house them on the roster.
Morrow Evans, who, John, this is it really in the weeds, but John Furlman's a senior. He's going to be gone after this year. Morrow Evans is a freshman, is going to be a second-year player. He's for whatever it's worth, he's a former 5-star long snapper. The people who do the kicking and the punting and the long snapping rankings, he was a 5-star, the number 1 long snapper in the country. His times, from what I've heard, are ridiculous. He's very good at his job. Future NFL long snapper. Had to transfer because you don't know. Then you're probably only going to have 1 long snapper on the roster this year. So, it's just it's crap. And the fact that they're putting these coaches in these positions, it's crap. And there are some coaches who are just going to walk in and tell their walk-ons to kick rocks, get out of the way, and they'll do it the wrong way. But for a guy like Matt Rule, who tries to do things the right way, for a guy like Ryan Day, who tries to do everything the right way, this sucks because they're trying their hardest to do things within the rules of the 105, and then they're told, oh, by the way, it might not be 105. So the whole scholarship situation is messed up. I'll just keep it for the kids in the back seat. If you're listening to this, it's messed up. Yeah, keeping it PG. It just makes me so mad, man. Like these kids, whatever.
Yeah, obviously, I think Nebraska has a long walk-on tradition. But Ryan Day even spoke when I asked him about this time coming up. I mentioned high school showcases coming up. Ohio State will be it. I imagine whether it's this one in Cincinnati or the couple of them that are around Ohio next weekend. In the coming weeks, they're down in other states seeing guys. While they're there, yes, they're checking in with guys that are 4-stars and 5-star guys, seeing them. But they're also getting eyes on hey, Pickerington North has a defensive lineman that has a handful of MAC offers, and he's a legacy offensive lineman in Elijah Durham Smith. Would he like to have the opportunity to come take a preferred walk on at Ohio State, and maybe we can get him some NIL money to help out, or does he want to go to the MAC? Now with the roster changes, what's going on, I don't know if you can fully do that. But Ryan Day was pretty candid about how they have to build a roster with different types of guys, and that's a situation where I think without the confirmed roster limits, you don't know the exact situation they're heading into without the next season, but. Overall, commend Ryan Day for his honesty about it. I also commend him for his honesty about the offensive line when asked about it, because there's one guy that he did name a starter yesterday, and that was Austin Saraveld, who was one of our big winners of the spring.
Yeah, let's get out of here on that. Austin Saraveld. Ryan Day just said, Austin's going to start for us. So, well, there you go. I don't know where.
I don't think they know where either. For the people listening, I don't think Ohio State necessarily knows exactly where it'll be. Probably limited down to a couple spots, but Ohio State is not locking him into one spot.
So, we're pretty cool with saying that Ethan Unyanwa is going to start at left tackle, right? We good with that?
Yeah.
Okay. We're good with. Eventually, I think he will win that job. So let's just level with that. Carson Hinsman's your center, right? Okay, we're good with that.
Yep.
After what we saw in the College Football Playoff, I don't think you can move Luke Montgomery out of the left guard spot until he gives you a reason not to.
Also, with what we saw this spring and how he kind of handled himself, it seems like he's actually a presence in that offensive line where it's we can't take him out of the lineup.
Correct. Tegra Shabola went healthy, which I don't think he was healthy for the entire back half of the season. He got hurt at Oregon. People kind of forget that because Josh Simmons got hurt at Oregon, but Tegra also got hurt at Oregon. I don't think he was the same player the entire rest of the season. He finally got some time off before the Tennessee game, and then in the College Football Playoff, he looked pretty good at left guard or at right guard. But also, Phillip Daniels, you brought in at right guard, who could be a starter at Minnesota right now. At right tackle. So, is Austin Saraveld going to play right guard, or is he going to play right tackle? And I think that's the big thing here. I think it's either right guard or right tackle. I think that left side it's not set, but it will be set eventually. And I think the hang-up is one of Tegra Shabola, Phillip Daniels, and Austin Saraveld will be on the bench. It will not be Austin Saraveld. So that's where we're at right now.
And with what we saw in the spring, Austin played a lot of right guard last season, rotated in Tegra at some points. Sometimes he looked better than Tegra. Sometimes Tegra, who's just a freak athlete, looked better. That switched back and forth consistently, but also they were both somewhat kind of young. Phillip Daniels is also young, and when Austin Saraveld was playing right tackle this spring, he looked like a stud. There was a couple of times where him and Bo Jackson were a magic pairing on kind of a pull run to the right side, just breaking off a couple touchdowns. Austin Saraveld will be a starter. Ryan Day confirmed that on Tuesday. Good for Austin, but it's going to come down to Tegra and Phillip Daniels deciding on who wants to not leave the lineup more, who wants to stay in the lineup more.
Yeah, and when we talked to Tyler Bowen, he seemed a little less committed to that rotating of offensive linemen in the starting lineup as much. Ryan Day and Justin Fry were all about that but I think that was also out of necessity. If you listen back to some postmortems from the playoff run with Ryan and from Justin Fry, I don't think Tyler Bowen is as gung-ho about that as those guys are. So we'll see. I don't know. We'll see how it shakes out because Austin Sareveld is officially a starter for Ohio State. We just don't know where. So we'll see. I think Carson Hinsman too. I think I would say without a doubt 100% Carson Hinsman and Austin Sareveld are the two most set-in-stone starters you have. From there, I have no idea. That's Mick Walker on the other side of your screen. I'm just Spencer Holbrook. That was a lot in a little bit of time, maybe a little bit shy of a half hour. We had a lot of fun in the time. Thanks for being here. Thanks for hanging out. Go to lettermenrow.com right now. $1 for your first 7 days. Oh, by the way, if you upgrade to the ad-free subscription, you get the ad-free membership. You can opt into text alerts, and then we'll text you, and you won't even have to come to the website until you get the text alert, and then you'll want to come to the website because you're paying for the website. Again, that's Mick. He's got the recruiting side locked down. I'm just Spencer. I'm talking about the team. I'm rambling a little bit. I'm a little bit like a Muppet these days with my hand movements and talking and calling people out, but that's okay.
But there's a lot of time for free thinking thoughts right now. So he's got opinions and takes. He's got some time to think.
Yeah, maybe May will be like the month of my takes. We'll see if we can workshop that a little bit. But Nick and Alex on the recruiting side, I'm just Spencer. Thanks for being here. Like the video below, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Come hang out at lettermenrow.com.